So a lot of people think that science is just about presenting facts, and what you don't realize is that much of the scientific effort of somebody that's doing this for a living is actually thinking about how to present those facts such that other people are going to believe what you're actually saying and what you're doing. And that is a real tricky thing. It's actually a more complicated problem than just presenting facts. There's a lot that goes into coming up with a scientific article that makes sense to other people. So what we have to do often is think about how other people are thinking about that information. And there's like this kind of sweet spot between being too simple and being too complicated. And it's really hard to sort of figure that thing out. And the challenge is not only the sort of simplicity versus complexity, but it's how much you're representing reality. So, I've said this many times before on this podcast, is that real data is really messy. And the more that you try to model real data and show that its realness, the more that people are going to question what you're actually doing. And so you have to figure out how to capture the realness of this data. And the way that we capture this is what's called, often is called in regression models. And what we're doing is just accounting for variance in some particular variable. So variance being how much it fluctuates with some other variable, right? So it might fluctuate. Let's say that traffic fluctuates with, the time of day. So we might look at like how the time of how much traffic is fluctuating with the time of day, and that's what we're really looking at. But we can add all sorts of complexity to that to model it more effectively. And now, from a traffic scientist kind of perspective, or if somebody that's doing it on a day-to-day basis, trying to actually model the traffic that goes on in a city, you'd want to do that as accurately as possible, right? And so you'd want to get a lot of fine-grained details. Sometimes you'd get things that don't quite make sense, but you might include it anyways in terms of an explanatory variable. And the reason why you do that is because it just captures more of what's going on, right? And so there's often you might do like just, I don't understand. So you might have this sort of approach. I don't know why this works, but it works, so I'm going to include this thing, right? Like you might count the number of socks that people wear, and you don't know why that actually works, but it actually explains a little bit of the traffic that's going on. And so you'd want to account for as much as you possibly can. But from the more scientific view, or as what many scientists actually try to do, is we don't want to include all of that kind of stuff because it doesn't add to the understanding of what's going on. You don't understand why wearing socks actually leads to more traffic. You can't explain it. But what we're looking for is short explanations about what's going on. So the more that you account for realism, the more that you account for what is going on, the more complicated it gets, and the harder it is to explain. So even though you try to keep things really short, really simple, inevitably, because of the nature of reality, it gets really complicated to explain anything. And to model anything. It just really does. You might think, well, this is going to be a really, really simple way to show it. You do it. You actually, write this stuff out. You realize, oh my gosh, this is really hard to explain what's going on. So you need to think about, how do you approach this? What is it that you have to say such that it doesn't overwhelm other people, and they're not going away coming from what they've just read and said, well, that was obvious. Like that doesn't add anything to me. So it's a real fine-grained it's not, it's really not a science. It's like science is not a science. It's really not. What it is very much an art where you are trying to figure out what is the appropriate amount of revealing what the real world actually looks like. And I know that seems like it's really stupid and it doesn't quite make any sense, but there's such an art to presenting information such that people don't get overwhelmed. They understand what you're talking about and they can sort of follow along. It's incredibly difficult. There's all sorts of empirical models out there to account for all sorts of different things. The problem is that most people don't understand those things. Try to have a conversation with somebody about regression. Most of you that are ever going to listen to this channel have no idea what I'm talking about, and yet it's considered the workhorse of science. That's what most people view it as. Regression is everywhere in science, but the more that you make this complicated, and the simplest regression is complicated, but there's really a lot that goes on. There's lots of complex, many different kinds of regression models that are out there, probably hundreds that I don't know about, thousands that I probably don't know about in terms of different models and how to treat different things. And you can get all sorts of complexity in what's going on. And the problem is you have to present this to tell people what's going on. And most people get overwhelmed, they get scared, they get nervous. Whenever somebody sees something that they don't understand and it is not absolutely painfully obvious, they get scared. And their response being when they're scared, they're doubtful, they don't like what they're seeing, all sorts of things like that. And you have to take a step back and say, how do I account for this? How do I make sense such that it becomes easy to tell somebody this particular story? And for me, I've been doing this for a long time. I don't know what the answer is. I don't know, and that's what makes it it's a very much an art. Science is very much an art because you either can sort of see these things and how to put them together, or you don't. And that's where the art comes in. So that's all I wanted to say. Hopefully you benefited from this. If you have, make sure you go onto the Reciprocity platform. I would appreciate it. Take care and have a wonderful day.